Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. It is the first day of December 2021. Hurricane season 2021 has officially come to an end, at least on the calendar. You never know, something might pop up in the month of December out there across the Atlantic Basin. It's still pretty warm, relatively speaking, at least against the averages. I'll show you that in just a little while. But here we are. It is the first day of the off-season. And so our off-season discussions will commence today. It doesn't mean, that yesterday was the end of the season, that is it. And then I go away for 6 months. Maybe some of you wish that I would. That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. But for the rest of you, yes, we have a lot that we do in the off-season. We stay in practice using other weather events to develop technology, to just stay out there, stay in front, stay on the top of mind. Other weather coverage is very interesting to me. I'm a weather geek at heart. And so here we are. This is the first day of 5-6 months of kind of off-season activity. And you never know. The hurricane season may get started early again next May. We had an early season development again this year, and that might be the same thing that we have next year. It's starting to change a little bit, isn't it? So anyway, here we are. First day of the off-season. So what are we going to talk about? Well, it's tropical cyclone season somewhere every hour of every day. Just not in the Atlantic Basin. So where is it active right now? Over here in the maritime continent, western Pacific region, we have a typhoon, a tropical storm, and an area of interest or an invest area here. None of these are of any major consequence to land right now, so we don't really have to worry about them, but I did want to point this out. That is one thing that I will talk about in the off-season. If we do have any cyclone activity, maybe in the southern hemisphere, something that might affect our friends down here in Australia or New Zealand. You never know. Some of the cyclone activity that could potentially affect Madagascar or southern Africa. And then anything over in the Indian Ocean, western Pacific. You just never know. It's always warm enough over there, water temperature-wise, in those low latitudes. And so, yes, we will stay on top of that, especially if something is rather menacing or newsworthy and is going to have a big impact on population areas. So, moving on into what we just dealt with. A lot of you already know this, but just to recap, and first of all, what a great set of graphics that I have to show you from CJ. He put these together. I have a wonderful team on the back end that helps out with graphics and a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, especially during our live coverage, and it has really helped us to come a long way, especially over these last 2 to 3 seasons, and I really appreciate that very, very much. It allows me to focus on doing what I do best and rounding up some of the best talent that we have out there so that we can give you the best coverage that we possibly can. And so this graphic is just a continuation of that. So CJ, thanks a lot. And Kari and Tim, all you guys, Mike Cornelius there in the background helping out for these graphics and other stuff. Much appreciated. So what do we have? Accolades now out of the way. Well, we had 21 named storms. That was above the long-term average. 7 hurricanes, which was right on the money of about where we should be, and 1 more major hurricane than we are used to seeing, and that wrapped up the season. Now, a lot of those tropical storms were weak, short-lived, and were detected by the use of technology above all else. We have fantastic satellite data now, scatterometer data that can actually measure the wind speed to a fairly accurate level using satellite technology. And so some of these named storms that we're getting now, yes, it kind of pads the score, but it is because of the technology. There's no underlying agenda. I know almost every one of these forecasters at the National Hurricane Center in person. I've known them, some of them, for more than 20 years. Believe me, they would rather things stay quiet. They want to have a job, of course, but whether or not they want to have a job, hurricanes are going to happen. I'm here because of hurricanes. But the bottom line is, the more activity there is, the more tropical cyclone reports that they have to write up in the off-season, and it just gives them extra busy work, and they want to focus on research and helping to advance the science later, not write a bunch of reports on junk storms. So, yes, it's the technology, and that's it. It's getting much better out there with detecting these storms, and so we ended up with 21, 7, and 4. How did that stack up against Colorado State University's forecasts? Well, overall, they were looking at anywhere from 17 to maybe 20 named storms. Different updates had different numbers, but nothing too varying. and we ended up with 21, three more than what they were thinking. They being Colorado State's Phil Klotzbach, Dr. Klotzbach, and his team who work on these seasonal forecasts each year. And then for hurricanes, they were predicting anywhere from 8 or 9, roughly. We ended up with 7, so kind of one less than they were thinking. But the major hurricanes, and that's what Ida was. Ida was a major hurricane. They predicted 4, and that's exactly what we had, which is 25% above the long-term average. And then this very key metric right here, the accumulated cyclone energy, they were looking at anywhere from 150 to 160. It was slightly under that forecast at 145. Overall, a very good forecast that they saw the signs coming. Phil Klotzbach and his team, Ben Knoll, Eric Webb, others that watch this. You see it, Jack Sillen, this whole new world of people growing up on Twitter now that we're seeing them on Twitter. A lot of smart people looking at this stuff. A lot of forecasts coming out each year from universities, private weather firms, and even people with a Facebook page that have 200,000 followers, and they just have a lot of people who like what they say. They put forecasts out too, and that's fine. So I just wanted to focus on something that's been around for decades, that there is a verifiable paper put out at the end of each season from Colorado State University, the authors of this paper, etc., the forecasts, and it just gives us a good gauge as to where the science has come from and where we're going in the future. And this was a good forecast this year. We saw the signs. Yes, there's the weird thing that happened where October and November just fell off of a cliff. That's a story for another day. I don't have an explanation for that, really. People are kind of looking into it. We'll deal with that later. Maybe we'll figure it out over the next couple of months. But these are the numbers for what we had this year, generally speaking. So again, the ACE of 145, above the long-term average of 121. And that accumulated cyclone energy is an important indicator of the quality of the season. Sam was our biggest ACE producer this year. I think it was over 50 ACE points or something like that. And it's the equivalent here, just to give you an idea, like if you're not sure what this means, this is like a basketball team, and you're going to have 8 guys or gals in rotation throughout the game, 8 or 9, whatever. And how many does each of them score? So your superstar player, they may score the most. Maybe they got 32 points that night. They had a big game. And some of the other players had 4 points, 6 points, 9 points, whatever. You add it all up, and that's the team's total. And that's what the ACE is. All the different named storms and hurricanes contribute to this number, this final number of the year of 145, which was a little bit above the long-term average there, showing us that we had a fairly robust season overall, despite the fact that we had a lot more named storms than we did actual hurricanes. This kind of helps to balance it all out and see through all of that as to what the actual quality of the storms, the tropical cyclones, were. All right, well, this is a big one. Where it really matters is the impacts. You could have a season like 2010 with a huge ACE number. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was a big year. We had 19 named storms that year, lots of hurricanes, big ACE score, and not a single hurricane hit the United States. It was still impactful, but we didn't get anywhere near what we did this year. $70 billion at least in estimated damages. This will certainly go up, more than likely, and it's in the top 5, certainly, of the costliest season, one of the costliest seasons on record, because these cyclones this year, these tropical cyclones, affected land. The United States in particular, and certainly the Caribbean islands. I'll show you that in just a moment as well. For the strongest wind speed, that would be Sam, hitting almost Cat 5 intensity. You never know. After analysis of all the data, Tropical Cyclone Report may show, we'll see, it may show that Sam was actually a Cat 5. We'll have to wait and see about that. That's not up to me. There's a whole group of people at the National Hurricane Center that look at that. We'll wait and see how that works out in the coming weeks and months. Probably months. Ida was certainly the strongest storm to make landfall this year. Another Category 4 hitting the United States. It is remarkable that we've had such a flurry of activity with these major hurricanes hitting the U.S. since 2017. And You go 12 years before that, from 05 through 17, that is 12 years, right? That no Category 3, 4, or 5s hit the United States. We had a big drought, and then all of a sudden a big flurry here of Cat 4s, and of course Michael was a 5 in 2018, and some 3s thrown in there, etc. Zeta last year was a 3, making landfall there in southeast Louisiana. Laura last year a 4. And these are the hurricanes that really bring the pain and the long-term damage. They can change an area for a generation or more. These major hurricanes, and the stronger they are, the more impacts they have, and that lasts for a long, long time. It really does. So that's important to note. Another big season for significant strong hurricanes hitting the U.S., and in this case it was one. Ida was the strongest. We had Nicholas that grazed the Texas coast as a Category 1, but Ida was very impactful. All the flooding up in the Northeast with the dozens of deaths versus, I think, single numbers of deaths in Louisiana, which was, you want 0, but people reacted and avoided the surge. But when Ida got up into the Northeast, we still have a lot to learn about dealing with inland flooding and how to communicate that risk. So there are some lessons that we need to apply going forward. And that segues nicely into this graphic. Again, another great culmination of work here from the back-end team to put this together. Really appreciate it. So Henri, and these are in no particular order. Henri was in the Northeast. That created some flooding, of course. Danny was down here in the southeast U.S. The Florida Peninsula, once again, escaping any activity pretty much at all, for the most part. Certainly no hurricanes affecting the Florida Peninsula. And that area has been extraordinarily lucky these last several years. Matthew came so close, right? October of 2016. Joaquin, even back in 2015, could have been one of those ones. You never know. But 16, certainly Matthew. 17, Irma, yes, made landfall as a major hurricane down in the Keys, affected southwest Florida, and was a devastating impact. Sure. But we all know, as they say, it could have been worse. So the Florida Peninsula really, really escaping the worst. You think about Dorian 2019, Michael, yes, in the Panhandle, but you bring something like Michael into Tampa, or Panama City directly, Panama City Beach directly, or Pensacola, or certainly a Dorian into South Florida. You understand, it's that area of Florida, Southeast Florida in particular, monumentally fortunate these last few years. But anyway, we had Elsa, Mindy, Fred. I was there for most of these. And then there's Ida, and then Claudette, very close together where they made landfall. Claudette indirectly responsible for those deaths along the I-65 corridor from the traffic accident, if you recall, and that will live with those people forever. That wound will never heal, and that's the kind of stuff we need to talk about in the future, these impacts. We get so focused on these numbers and the hype behind it and whatever, but it's what they do and how they're going to impact you that really, really matters. There's Nicholas, and then it's not just the U.S. Grace came along and kind of impacted all these different areas. Elsa also, and Ida impacting Cuba, and then Grace finally making a landfall as a Cat 3 down in Mexico. So pretty neat graphic here. I tweeted this graphic yesterday, so if you're not following me on Twitter, now's a good time to do so, at Hurricane Track, and you can see this graphic in its full glory on Twitter. All right? I'll also probably throw it up on Instagram, also Hurricane Track on Instagram. I'll talk about what I'm doing, or will do more with Instagram later. So, that was then. This is now. Where do we go from here? Well, this will be something that we look at least once a week. Probably every Monday, but at least once a week. I'll do a discussion every week, one way or the other. Usually on a Monday, but sometimes I might be traveling or just don't feel like it. So I'll do it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever. But we will get together once a week and talk about the tropics. And this will be a big cornerstone of what we discuss and what I talk to you about. And that is the sea surface temperature anomalies, the departures from the long-term average. And as we ended the hurricane season yesterday, this is always a day behind, November 30th, this is what we have, what we got. What do you got out there? Well, this is it. Most of the Atlantic Basin warmer than average by a pretty good margin. Most of the Pacific here, pretty much the entire East Pacific, north and south, below average. The La Nina going on really solidly here, very prominent in the equatorial region, and this will be what we watch in the coming months. How does this change? Because it will. It's not going to stay the same. Does the Atlantic Basin stay warmer on the whole, especially down in the deep tropics? And will this La Nina kind of moderate some and maybe warm up a little bit? And then where will things be when we get to June, July, August, and beyond of next year? So we'll be keeping an eye on that over the coming weeks. That'll give us something to do, certainly. And related to that, we can look at the different modeling. And this is one of those tools here, the CFS V2. And this gets updated pretty much every day. This got updated, in fact, today. And you can see the ensemble mean. Pretty good La Nina here going all the way through to next July, and it's dead neutral. The ensemble mean is dead neutral. These blue lines in here are the latest runs. The red lines are the older ones. And some of those blues, a little bit more of them showing cooler. So the CFS, look, things can change over 2 or 3 months, you bet. There's pretty good skill here. It's not the best, but odds are, just looking at history and how the modeling is and just the way things just have gotten better with how these climate models handle this stuff, I would venture to guess that by next season we'll be looking at cool neutral to just slightly warmer than neutral, somewhere in that ballpark. No El Nino. It's hard to fathom with the Pacific, as cold as it is, relatively speaking, against the averages. Most of the North Pacific here, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, the PDO, is negative. You got this pretty strong La Nina in here, and just the general drivers don't favor an El Nino to develop. Doesn't mean it can't. Don't mistake what I'm saying for Mark said it can't happen. No, I'm not saying that. My gut tells me we're not going to have an El Nino. And the El Nino is what really helps to shut the Atlantic Basin down. So to make it real simple, when we get to next year, especially by August, September, October, if much of the Atlantic is at least average to slightly warmer, and we don't see a bunch of cold anomalies there, and the Pacific is slightly warmer than average to slightly cooler with no major warm anomalies, we're going to have a busy hurricane season again next year. Period. 14, 15, 16 named storms, 7 or 8 hurricanes, 3 or 4 major hurricanes. Seriously, that's what I would expect to happen, everything else being equal. That's a good house, safe, Vegas bet, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? That's a safe bet. So we'll see. Write it down. Was Mark right on December 1st? And it's not even a matter of being right. It's not a forecast. It's more of a what I think makes the most sense going forward. And we can watch these different indicators and see how that sort of prediction, if you want to call it that, my gut feeling, how that evolves over time. All right, we'll also look at actual sea surface temperatures. These are anomalies, departures from the average. These are your actual temperatures, and this is the Gulf of Mexico region. And these are in degrees Celsius. This is your areas that are divided into isotherms, lines of equal temperature. There's 25 Celsius, for example. And this nice little loop current feature right in here, this is 26, 27. So yeah, a good chunk of the Gulf of Mexico on December 1st is still above the threshold to get hurricane activity. There are just other factors that prevent that from happening almost all the time. Once in a while you get an anomaly and you get something developing in the off season, but usually not in the Gulf, in the winter months. That's just almost unheard of. But that's a pretty warm look overall. And look, there's 28 Celsius, which is 82 Fahrenheit, nosing its way up in through the Yucatan Channel there into the Central Gulf. And the longer this takes to cool down, the more energy is already going to be there, not only for next year's May and June window, when we start to switch things back to becoming more favorable in this part of the world, but for severe weather season, for the flood season for the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana. That's the Gulf Coast, of course. So there's more to this than just hurricane season. The implications of the Gulf remaining warm, and wait till I show you something towards the end of this forecast, this update. It's not a forecast. I'll just tell you what's going on out there. I don't know where that came from, but that's fine. Towards the end of it's a forecast I'm going to show you from the Climate Prediction Center. That's where that came from. Further sort of solidifying this, it's not a concern, because I really try to be careful to not brew up doom and gloom and hype and concern. Like, let's just look at the facts and see where things land. And there is some sort of concerning signal, I will say, as we go through December, that the Gulf is going to remain warm. And the longer you keep it warm, because what's going to happen in about 10 days, the days are going to start growing longer again. And it's a slow process, I know. But in other words, you know what I mean? Like, there's only a short window of opportunity for things to cool off. And if they don't, then you leave the door open for powerful extratropical storms, the mid-latitude winter storms that we get, and certainly next year's hurricane season potentially getting started early in May, or certainly getting started right there in the first part of June. Anyway, let me just keep moving forward before I get lost and off on too much of a tangent. Western Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, whatever, the Northwest Atlantic, warm. You see the area in there. But again, what I am just marveled by, or whatever you want to call it, is that the gradient here, the difference in temperature over distance, is minuscule. I mean, there's very little color change through here. Let's use black. That'll help it pop better. You see what I'm saying? It's like 24, 25 out here in the Gulf Stream, Celsius. And then, there's a little bit of a gradient. That's what these lines that are packed tightly together are. But the gradient is much stronger right here near the North Carolina coast because of the shelf water. But in the Northwest Atlantic, the water is so warm up here, relative to average, that the difference between here and the Gulf of Maine, for example, and the Gulf Stream is not that much. And so you don't have all these tightly packed isotherms in here, meaning that the temperature gradient is not that strong. And you can see that reflected. These are the actual temperatures, 11, 12, 13 Celsius to 24. Yeah, that's cold from my book. But look at the anomaly up here. It is way above the long-term average. And I will use the word concerning for that, because that has a lot of implications for a lot of different things, including powerful mid-latitude storms, nor'easters, whatever, and just the way the pressure patterns are creating higher pressure over the Northwest Atlantic that drives the southeast ridge, and then you get a warmer Gulf and warmer Caribbean. Everything feeds back. It's all connected. And that very warm Northwest Atlantic is a concern. I'll just come out and say it. It absolutely is. So that's interesting. We'll watch that and see, does this cool off anomaly-wise, and then the actual temperatures. And you see that gradient so light is really remarkable. So let's see what that looks like in a month, January 1st. That'll be interesting. All right, so the off-season, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do this update, like I said, at least once a week. And then we're going to just work on all kinds of cool stuff together. I've got this tremendously enthusiastic and supportive group on Patreon that averages between 700 to 900 people strong per year over the last few years here. It's really grown substantially. And us working together with that pool of money and that pool of talent and that pool of resources, everybody working together, we're going to come up with some really cool things in the off season. I will cover winter storms, and we will put into practice some of the equipment that we're using. We'll develop new stuff along the way. I'm like the front man of the band or the orchestra. Believe me, there is an entire orchestra behind me. So let's just call it we going forward. I resolve that we're going to call it we. It's not just me, it's us and we. So we are going to cover together, and you're going to be part of it too, winter storms, and that will include nor'easters, lake effect events, coastal storms, whether or not they bring snow, the big windy coastal storms that have flooding and whatnot along the mid-Atlantic, etc. I want to go to Scituate, Massachusetts, and put these cameras that we have up there right in some homeowners' balconies. If you live up there, you know people that live in Scituate, or some of the other areas right there along the coast that are vulnerable, get in touch with me now. Send me an email. Find me on Twitter. Somebody's knocking stuff down in my house on the other side of the wall there. The cats are at it again. You hear that? That was weird. And let me know. Let's solve these problems now. Where can we put these cameras that we've got to show you and immerse you in this really impactful weather, let's figure it out ahead of time. So yes, I'm excited about the nor'easters. A big mid-latitude storm, I want to cover that over the nation's midsection in the Great Plains. In fact, let's go over to the map here and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. Nor'easters, the northeast part of the United States, your true powerhouse hurricane force nor'easters. I mentioned Scituate and vicinity, Cape Cod, and then the Tug Hill region. Absolutely fascinated by that area for lake effect. Not ignoring the other lakes and the potential for lake effect snows there, but Cleveland, Buffalo, etc., big population areas. A lot of people are already going to be documenting those events using this. Tug Hill region, not as populated, and you get a lot higher snow there on an annual basis, and it's just a beautiful area. I want to cover one of those, and maybe a couple of them, we'll see. And then again, like I said, a high plains blizzard or two, that would be something else. I've got a real good friend and colleague out here and supporter, Matt, in the Denver area, and his buddy, a good friend of the project, Scott. We're going to be working together to create some stuff. So a high plains blizzard, I want to go over to northern Arizona, and I know that extended over to Nevada, but you get the idea. A desert winter storm, Flagstaff, that northern Arizona, Sedona area, the Kaibab Forest, really, really fascinating to me. Using our technology, immersing you in the action, and showing you the impacts, from the cameras, from the meteorological data, and then one really big thing, and I'm going to zoom in on the map here and just kind of bring it to highlight here for you. This guy that I've been talking about a little bit, you've heard me mention it maybe a little bit on Twitter. I think I mentioned it in an update recently. Evan Fisher over at UNC Asheville and his colleagues. Grandfather Mountain sits in here. And I want to, in just a couple weeks, take up one of our anemometers and our camera systems to Evan, and he's going to haul it up there to one of those ridge lines once he gets the permits for it. And we're going to have live wind data coming from one of our hurricane-rated weather stations, those R.M. Young anemometers, right up there on the ridge line. Fingers crossed, he's just got to get the permits for it, and it's going to be incredible. And we're going to be able to watch that from the live cam. They're going to strap those things down to some boulders up there, and it's going to take like an army of dudes to... I'm not doing it. I'm going to sit back and watch it. I'm going to teach them how to set it up, and we're going to do this outreach and start using our equipment for other projects. I will be working more and more with Dr. Ryan Meares from UNC Wilmington, the coastal engineer that I met just because of Ida and because of social media. He teaches at the same university that I have my degree from in geography, for what it's worth. So lots of stuff going on in the off season. And then once we get to spring, we are going to have a project in Tornado Alley unlike any other that you have ever seen. Putting our technology to use in a way that will immerse you in a severe weather outbreak, not tornado chasing, not storm chasing, but storm and tornado potentially immersion. Immerse you in the action, both from a camera perspective, live, 4K video from multiple GoPros set up, 360 degrees, the weather balloon high above those supercells to the stratosphere, and of course on the ground reporting from yours truly and my team, and data, pressure data, temperature data, wind data. You have no clue. I mean, I'm trying to tell you here, we are building this amazing armada of equipment that we will deploy out in the alley, mainly as a dress rehearsal, because this is probably going to happen in May for next year's hurricane season, and it is going to be remarkable and give us an unprecedented view of what happens when these supercells come through. And if they produce tornadoes, hey, it'll be really interesting to see, but that's not the goal. We're not tornado chasing, like I said. It's more, I call it our spike strip project. You know how they throw a spike strip out in front of a fleeing high-speed suspect? Well, those supercells go across the plains, usually at some pretty high speeds. It's a good, catchy name. We set up this spike strip of equipment 10, 15 minutes before that supercell is going to cross. It's a grid network of roads out there for the most part. Pretty easy to do. We set up the equipment over about a 2-mile area. The supercell runs across it. We have this great capture of data, visually, 4K video, live video, show you what it looks like live, and from our weather sensors, and we'll transmit as much of it possible live. There's going to be hundreds of chasers out there with vehicle cams, and everybody has a purpose. They all do their thing. This is what we're going to do, and this is how I think we can contribute back to the science, to the awareness, and just to the awe-struck feeling that we get when we see these kinds of events unfold, and have the respect for it as well. Treat it with the respect that it deserves from a cinematic perspective, from the adventure. It's man versus nature, but we don't have to treat it like it's something to conquer or anything like that. We're going to approach it from a very methodical, scientific, and purposeful vantage point. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the lower 48 over the next few months. And then, of course, we'll be watching the tropics down here, see what's happening as we get towards the hurricane season in 2022. All right, so looking ahead, this is what I was talking about. Morehead City, National Weather Service, Morehead City. Today is the first day of meteorological winter, and then astronomically that happens in a few weeks, December 20th, 21st, whatever. But meteorologically, this is it. And yet, not even close. Nope, not happening. It's going to be above normal for much of the lower 48 over the next 6 to 10 days. And then I got to tell you, this is bad news for the ski resorts of the United States, generally speaking. But the 8 to 14 time frame, mid-December, basically, pretty good bet that almost the entire lower 48 will be above average temperature-wise. And that goes back to what I was saying about the Gulf of Mexico. You don't have these big Arctic pushes coming down. You don't have the cold air advection blowing across to mix it all up and bring that cold, dense air. The Gulf will stay warm. It's going to take a lot longer. It'll gradually cool off until we start to reverse that sun angle and it starts to increase again here in about 10 days or so. It's only slight at first. I understand that. But this is a really interesting signal, I got to admit, going forward. And if it's dry on top of this warmth overall, we could start seeing some areas in the southeast U.S. and maybe Florida possibly having some drought issues, not to mention our good friends in the west and the southwest. That's always a concern. So this is something we're going to have to watch closely going forward. And I'll touch upon this on our lower 48 discussion as part of this weekly update. Absolutely. So, as a good way to kind of end it, that's what the temperatures look like over the next 2 weeks, just for fun. Let's look at what the GFS shows over the next 2 weeks. This is the 12Z run today. And this is your sea level pressure, your rain rate in millimeters per hour. It kind of shows you your snow and ice, your rain, and if it's heavier rain or snow, it's a darker color, and your surface pressures and things like that. It's a good weather map to just give you an idea of how things are going to progress over the next 2 weeks. So let's just put this into motion here. We'll just let it play, and you notice no major storms. That blue thickness line, the thickness is there. Couple troughs come in. There's one right there. This digs in right there, and then the heights, lift. They build back in. These troughs are transient, and it's kind of zonal flow. You see everything's moving across the country, basically west to east, instead of longitudinally down like that. You don't see these big, deep troughs digging in, so we don't have these big temperature contrasts to give us these giant storm events. That's just not happening over the next couple of weeks or so, and we can stop this and just kind of move it fast. See what I mean? Everything's just generally transitory and very progressive. Some rain and some frontal intrusions down south, but no Arctic boundaries getting down here to disturb the Gulf and to bring a lot of rain for Florida. Very interesting going forward as we move through the first 2 weeks of this 12th month of the year 2021. All right? So that's pretty much it. It's kind of lengthy today, but I think we covered a lot of good stuff. I want to end it saying that I appreciate you all being around all year. Maybe you're brand new. Maybe you've been with me for the full, pretty much, the internet really got started in the mid-90s and beyond. But this is my 25th year of doing this professionally. I didn't make much about it. I kind of didn't even think about it because time flies when you're having fun. And it just dawned on me, dude, I just finished my 25th year of talking about hurricanes, tracking hurricanes, studying hurricanes, whatever you want to call it. professionally. I started my business like literally 25 years ago, in the field, studying hurricanes in the field. I actually started the business name of Hurricane Maps Enterprises. That's my business name 26 years ago. That was 1995. But I got out in the field. Bertha and Fran were the first two that I literally went out, and even though they hit right here, those are the first two that I truly studied as a professional, if you will. I had my degree, and I was looking at it from a scientific perspective and all of that. So this is the 25th year. I can't believe it. It's like, whoa. Where'd the time go, first of all? And secondly, more importantly, look how far I have come and the project has come as a whole. And at the end of the day, honestly, it's only because of you guys there, whether it was the before YouTube days when HurricaneTrack.com was really in its heyday before social media, and it would have millions of visitors during a hurricane season. Now it's diluted. There's a lot of different sites, and you aggregate everything together, and yes, we still have millions of visitors, but it's across the Hurricane Track brand, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and the website. It all adds up. But yeah, we started early with the website in 1999. We've come a long way with live video, pioneering that starting in 2005. And here we are 16 years after the advent of live streaming during hurricanes. We were the first to ever do it. Look how far we have come, and I thank you. So remember, Twitter, yep, we're there at Hurricane Track. YouTube, you're watching on YouTube more than likely. Some of you are watching on Facebook because we're going to be uploading these videos to Facebook going forward. But yeah, we're on YouTube, youtube.com/Hurricane Track. Facebook, the same, it's all Hurricane Track, and you just look for that logo, and it's Hurricane TRACK, pretty easy to find. And also Instagram. I'm going to be doing more on Instagram, realizing I kind of got in it a few years ago, then I let it go a little bit, so I'll be posting more there. Kind of more of a diary of how things are going, just a few behind-the-scenes things, and then during our missions, it'll literally be like this little diary of what we're doing and these quick updates, maybe a couple of live things, and yeah, we'll be doing Instagram more and more. Still haven't figured out what I might ever do with TikTok, though, I'm going to be honest with you. Not quite ready for that, just to let you know. So we got enough going on. Hey, look, again, thanks for following along. This year, the last 25 years, here's to 25 or more going forward. I would certainly love to be around to see what we do in another 2.5 decades from now. Hard to imagine, but it'll happen. You guys have a great rest of your week. As always, like I said, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. It's now the off season. I'll talk to you again early next week.